Now I'll be glad to take your questions.
Governor, regarding the enforcement, are you referring to just a continued enforcement with businesses, restaurants, things of that nature, or is that also referring to the stay-at-home order? And if so, how would that latter part look like? And also, can you just clarify the difference for the mask mandate here? What's different now than what currently is?
Yeah, Cam, thank you for the question, and I'll start with the mask. And you know, to date, we have required the use of or wearing of mask inside, especially when you're involved with service to the public. So that is expanding to anybody indoors, especially when they're not able to keep 6 feet of distance. I gave the example of restaurants. We have also seen convenience stores across Virginia where people have walked in and none of the employees have on masks. So everybody indoors, everybody will be required to wear a mask. As far as outdoors, we know that when people are gathered tightly together and individuals don't have masks, we know that the virus spreads through being aerosolized. And so if one can't maintain 6 feet of distance outdoors, they're going to be required to wear a mask as well. Regarding the enforcement, it will be similar to what we've already been doing, especially in places of business. But the enforcement will be stepped up. And I commend our agencies across Virginia. They've been doing a good job, but I've asked them to continue to do the same and increase that. And I'll just use an example, Cam, when we had the numbers rising in Hampton Roads. Most people were doing the right thing, but there were a number of businesses that weren't. We went into those businesses. Some of them were shut down, and the word spread. And I just want to make sure that Virginians take this seriously, because we're serious about it, and not to, reiterate, but we're very concerned about our hospital capacity, especially in the Southwest. And if the numbers continue to go up, we're going to have some real challenges. And so that's what we plan to do with masks and the enforcement.
Yeah. That 12 to 5, is that going to be something that's enforced?
That's something that we will ask Virginians to follow those guidelines, and that's the way we'll move forward with that.
Luann Rice, Roanoke Times.
Good afternoon, Governor. Could you explain the reasoning behind the curfew and what, staying home between midnight and 5 a.m. will actually do to slow the spread of this virus?
Thank you. The question is the curfew, the stay-at-home that is between midnight and 5 a.m. And I'll use 2 words to summarize. It's called common sense. I also said something that my parents taught me when I was younger, and that is that nothing good happens after midnight. So we're asking individuals, when our bars close, when restaurants close, unless they have any other business, unless they're working, traveling to and from work, they need to be at home.
Just a follow-up on the curfew. North Carolina decided to do 10 p.m. I already know that a lot of our businesses are, closed after midnight anyway. Just curious about why you decided to make it a little later for Virginia. And then as a second question, just curious about the state of testing. Since our positivity rate is now 11%, is there anything the state is doing to make sure that we have ample testing, and where are we on that?
Yeah. Mel, thank you for your questions. And the first question is why midnight? We're trying to follow the guidelines that are already in place and be consistent. And as I said earlier, we've stopped the sale of alcohol at 10 o'clock. Restaurants close at midnight. And so that's why we made it from midnight to 5 a.m. Regarding testing, I don't know, Dr. Carey or might want to take that, but we're testing on average over 20,000 individuals, and I'll let Dr. Oliver comment, but I'm confident that we have the supplies that we need, and the turnaround time is much improved. Still room for improvement, but Dr. Oliver.
Thank you, Governor. Oops. So as the Governor mentioned, we are averaging about 20,000 tests per day. We have plenty of test supplies. We know now that the National Guard will be with us through March of next year. We will continue to mobilize teams with the Guard to do testing. Our local health departments are doing a lot of testing. Commercially, the labs are also doing, most of those 20,000 tests are being done. Commercially, the turnaround time is under 2 days across the Commonwealth. So that's not the problem. The problem with the test positivity is not that we're not doing enough testing, but that the disease is just spreading quite widely, and the number of cases is quite high. So the steps that we have outlined and that the governor's talked about and in terms of mitigation are what we need to do. People need to wear their masks, watch their distance, and wash their hands, and we'll get that back down.
Sarah Rankin, Associated Press.
Actually, this is Alan Bitterman. I'm going to fill in for Sarah. Governor, I had a quick question on schools. What's your thoughts on the fact that some private schools are operating in person in districts where the public schools are not open? Has there been any thought into, trying to make sure there's a uniform response, in areas where public schools are only virtual, but there are private schools that are offering in person?
Yeah, thank you, Alan, and also thank you for just one question today. So I appreciate that, and it's a good question. And Mr. Suderman's question was regarding the private schools are in person. Some of the public schools in the same areas are learning virtually. And so what we've tried to do, or what we have done, is allowed individuals to use their discretion, especially in localities. We know that one size doesn't fit all, and also the private schools may be in a different position as far as their ability to test, do tracing, et cetera. So we've given the private schools as well as the public schools the discretion on whether to teach in person or virtually, and that's the way we'll continue to move forward.
I have two questions, but one's more of clarification. So the first one, so my understanding previously...
Is that one of your two, or that's just going to be a total?
No. This is there's two total, including the clarification.
All right.
So my understanding previously was that the mask mandate applied to indoor public spaces. So are you now requiring that people wear them indoors and private?
Well, that's something enforcement-wise. We're not going to go into private places of business, Jackie, but just as we do here when we're in our office and by ourselves, I think it's appropriate that one can take their mask off, but anytime you're around other individuals, we put our mask on, and that's what I would encourage the private sector to do as well.
Gotcha. Okay. And then in regards to places of worship, so I've seen
Yes.
some states rolling back capacity occupancy here. It sounds like you're just encouraging faith leaders to sort of take the lead on this rather than instilling formal capacity limits. So my question is, why not do that ahead of the holidays when churches and others are expected to be busy? And did the Supreme Court decision influence that decision for you?
Yeah, I think you just answered that question. But I will tell you, Jackie, and my church, as you know, is on the Eastern Shore, and they were actually worshiping from the parking lot, and we don't even have in-person worshiping. And so a lot of places of worship, most of them across Virginia have done the right thing. But there are some, and I've heard reports, just like everybody else has, that they don't use distancing inside the church. They're not wearing masks. And quite frankly, we know that a lot of the spread is coming from this because these individuals that are in a place of worship and contract the virus, then go out to their place of work or to the grocery store or the convenience store or wherever. And that's how this is spread. And so that's a long-winded answer to your question, but there is a case, as you know, at the Supreme Court in New York they were not able to enforce guidelines in places of worship, and so we're following suit with that.
So the state hasn't done any enforcement in churches?
No.
Okay. And that will continue?
That will continue.
Okay.
Jackie, that's 5 questions, just for the record.
We'll go to Roberto Roldan with VPM.
Governor, I just wanted to try to get a little bit of clarification. The curfew, is that guidance or is that a mandate? It sounds like the state and local law enforcement won't be able to enforce or put a penalty on folks who aren't observing by the curfew. Is that accurate?
It's a modified stay-at-home order, and let me try to clarify it or reiterate it if I can. Between midnight and 5 a.m., unless there's a purpose to be out, such as traveling to and from work or working, one needs to stay at home. But it's also, I think, to your question, it's part of messaging. And even during the other hours of the day, if you don't need to be outside of your house, we know that the safest place to be is at home. So yes, it's about messaging, but it's also about saving lives. 54 additional deaths we recorded today, over 2,000 hospitalizations, 4,000 new cases. If you don't need to be outside of your house, we need to take this seriously. We need to stay at home.
Yeah, I also have a couple of questions, but I'll start with the first one, which is just, is there a reason why you haven't expanded current restrictions on indoor dining and other non-essential businesses to reduce capacity or even close them altogether? I guess fundamentally, like, why focus on gatherings, but then Virginians can still go eat inside a restaurant?
As you know, Kate, we've put some fairly aggressive restrictions on our restaurants. Bars are closed. Alcohol sales stop at 10 o'clock. Tables have to be distanced 6 feet. And so effectively what we've done, we have reduced the capacity in our restaurants. And I think if you probably have talked to restaurant owners, in almost all cases that capacity is less than 50%, the way that our guidelines are written. And most of the restaurants are complying with that. The additional step that we're taking today, because we have seen some of this, is to make sure that not only servers, not only patrons when they're not eating or drinking wear masks, but also the people that are working in the kitchen, the chefs, the individuals that wash dishes, et cetera. So we're encouraging everybody to wear masks, but they already have some fairly strict restrictions in the restaurants, and we're not changing that.
And second part, like you mentioned, the current restrictions and the new ones announced today won't affect schools. And I think widely, a lot of Virginians are hearing that transmission isn't occurring in schools and that schools are taking steps. But I know in Southwest Virginia, school leaders or health officials have recommended that school districts shut down and stop in-person instruction until after the new year to try and reduce some of the spread. Mm-hmm. And so that to me seems a little incompatible, and I'm wondering, why ask for that if schools are also safe?
Well, as you know, and I've said this a couple of times, Kate, we have left decision-making in the school districts to the discretion of the school boards, the superintendents in each district, and the reason for that is, one size doesn't fit all. And so they're making modifications. The one that you just mentioned, which with the holidays coming up, I think is fine. But that's a decision that they have been able to make, and they'll continue to make. And I'm not going to change that.
We're going to do two more, one on the phone, and then Andre will get the last.
David McGee, Bristol Herald-Courier.
Yes, thank you, Governor. You mentioned Southwest Virginia several times, and the rise here appears to be in part perhaps because we're next to Tennessee where the cases are skyrocketing. I'm wondering if your office has had any communication with Governor Lee's office or had any other special advice for this part of the state.
The answer to that is yes, and we communicate quite often with our neighboring states. And to your point, there are a number of increased cases in Tennessee, as well as Kentucky. They're on our western borders, and they come to and fro across state lines. So we have made it clear that we're seeing our numbers rise in those areas to those particular state leaders, and hopefully they'll make some changes as well.
Governor, 2 questions, if I may. How are you doing today?
I'm well, Andre. Thank you for asking.
You're welcome. First, in terms of crime, in the city of Lynchburg, we've had increased calls of shots fired and malicious woundings. We had 2 shootings this week within an hour apart in Hampton Roads, walking through Douglas Park this week in Portsmouth, Virginia. Senior citizens said they're scared to come outside. Young people, middle-aged, are scared to come out for exercise. Crime is up. In terms of the virus and complications thereof, is there anything that you are looking into in terms of the effects of COVID and crime in our cities throughout the Commonwealth?
Well, that's a great question, Andre, and I think it's fair to say, and that's certainly don't want to condone that type of behavior, but Virginians, Americans are stressed right now. People have lost their jobs, people have lost their businesses, people have lost their homes. Over 20% of the population doesn't know where their next meal is coming from. They're food insecure, and so I think it's a time, especially during the holiday season, that we really step back and I hear people talk about their rights, and I'm all about rights, but I think we need to talk about responsibility. And I think all of us have a responsibility right now to look out for our fellow mankind, our neighbors, our family, our friends, and to realize that we're hurting. Virginians, Americans are hurting right now. And so, I'm not in the law enforcement business, but I would hope, and I suspect they will encourage our law enforcement agents to be in the communities. And they've really tried to do that, be more part of the community and let people know that they're there to keep the peace and to keep people safe. And so, again, I think it's a group effort as we move forward and make sure that we take care of everybody. I will say, in addition to that note, Andre, that people are hurting, businesses are hurting, et cetera. This is a time for Congress to step up as well, and especially before the holidays. I think we were able to use the CARES Act funding quite well in Virginia to help in a lot of these areas, whether it be evictions or homelessness or food insecurity or small businesses getting back on their feet. And it is imperative that our Congress act. And put their politics aside and realize that people are hurting now. And it's also imperative that we have leadership in the White House. For some reason, unfortunately, it seems that our president has just checked out. He's checked out on the pandemic. I don't hear anything said about it. And so it's time for real leadership. And in order to get past this pandemic, in order for it to put it in the rearview mirror, to get our economy back up and running, to get people back work, to get our children back in school, we need leadership. It is so important. So I ask for that in Washington. I want to yes.
Secondly, your parole board recently released Mr. Greg Joyner in Lynchburg after he served, he had a life sentence for killing and an attempted rape when the young lady was 15. I think he was 16. And a lot of people in the community are frustrated, wondering what is the policy? How are some of these violent offenders being released? And of course, I've interviewed Secretary Moran, who's talked about Virginia being the state of a second chance.
Yes, our parole board looks at each case in a lot of detail. Andre, I have confidence in our parole board, and I'll continue to support them. They obviously, parole is an important part of criminal justice reform. I think that they're doing good work, and when these individuals are eligible for parole and they feel that it's safe for them to be released from corrections, then that's a decision they'll make, and that's a decision that I'll continue to support. I hope that all of you will just stay with me for just a second. I have an announcement regarding personnel, and this won't take long, but I want to have final announcement, and that is bittersweet, one for our administration. Kiana Connor, as many of you know, is our Secretary of Administration, and she is leaving us for a new opportunity in the private sector. Kiana has been an exceptional member of our cabinet. She has overseen 3 elections in the midst of this pandemic, and she has done an excellent job. She led the effort to transition our state workforce, thousands of people, to work remotely in a matter of days, and oversaw the work to ensure that we had the technology infrastructure to make it happen. Kiana has also led our Department of Elections through cybersecurity and technology reviews to make sure our election system is safe. She recruited the Commonwealth's first chief data officer and oversaw the effort to make sure all levels of government share their data with each other. She has been the leader and greatest advocate for our workforce. We will miss Kiana, and on behalf of the Commonwealth, I am extremely grateful for your service. Also, to announce in her place, we are appointing Grinley Johnson, who is currently our Deputy Secretary of Administration, as Secretary. Grinley has deep roots in state service. She was Deputy Secretary of Transportation in the McAuliffe administration and previously served as Chief of Administration for the Virginia Department of Transportation. She has served in the private sector as an accountant, financial analyst, and community relations consultant. I am grateful to Grinley for her service in this administration and pleased to have her as a member of our cabinet. So I have both Kiana and Grinley. On behalf of Virginia, Kiana, thank you so much for your service. One final note, as I mentioned earlier, this is an extremely important month for our faith communities. It is indeed the holiday season. I know that Christmas and Hanukkah are truly cherished times. People gather with friends and family to celebrate. The holidays look a bit different this year, and some of the traditions we treasure just aren't possible. Big gatherings are not safe. But the holidays are also a time to remember that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. We remember the men and women who serve our country, especially those who are away from their loved ones this time of year. And we also remember the nurses and doctors who continue to save lives in this pandemic, as well as the essential workers. This season, I am most grateful for the people of Virginia. You have shown remarkable resilience and generosity this year. It has been a tough one, I know, but as we look ahead to a new year, I see reasons for hope and optimism that in the coming months, things will be better. So to all of you, thank you for being here today. Thank you for viewing from home. And if I don't speak to you before the holidays, all of you, I wish you a safe and peaceful holiday season and a much better 2021. Thank you very much.